Good evening, Baruchim Abbaim Rabotai. Welcome to another edition of our Thursday night's class. Tonight's class was sponsored by Ms. Zakilov, Latzlacha Ulevracha for her family. Bezrat Hashem, they should have a K'tiva v'Chatima Tova, Shana Tova M'vorechet, Im Kol HaBruchot Shebatorah, Amen v'Amen. I want to begin with a thought that I'm sure it's brought down in the Sfarim. I don't, the one who told it to me, or the one I heard a recording of that said it, and later on also shared it with me, didn't remember where he saw it, but he said it was brought down in many books. But the rationale behind it is extremely simple, and things that have simple rationale normally are the most powerful messages. In Tanakh we have, in the Megillot, Shir HaShirim as one of them. Sephardic Jewry, and I think some Hasidim as well, read Shir HaShirim every Friday night. Many read it in general. It's verses that, besides for the Etzem Koach HaTorah, which of course is the most important, also has a lot of elements to it that have a positive impact on a person's life. Shir HaShirim technically is chapters written about the dynamic of the relationship between God and us. Shlomo HaMelech, Shir HaShirim Asher Shlomo, wrote a song, meaning a version of poetry, if we'll call it that, not in the sense that we understand it today, in order to, in somewhat human terms, try to bring out or explain the dynamic of the relationship that we have with Hashem, and that Hashem has with us, both-sided. Meaning, technically speaking, on a very practical level, if a person wants to get a deeper understanding of his relationship with Borei Olam, if he studies Shir HaShirim well with its commentaries, he will learn a lot about the actual relationship. He'll get a deeper understanding of the relationship. Maybe that's why there was, I'm not saying this on the Halacha and just more on the Darash and why it became so popular by the Sfaradim over the years to read Shir HaShirim Friday Eve, meaning between Mincha and Avit on Shabbat or before Mincha, depending on the custom, because Shabbat is the day that's Kulol Hashem, it's all God's day. When you go into a day that's God's day, obviously you want to understand about your relationship with God. People, I know that today they have some sort of trend called marriage at first sight or something like that, but that's a very failing proposition. In reality, people, if you want to have a normal relationship, you have to know the other person. And, you know, God is eternal, there's no person, but if we want to have a good relationship with Hashem, the more we understand the dynamics of the relationship, the better our relationship will be. So, right at the beginning of Shir HaShirim, it expresses an act of love from God to the nation, to the Jewish nation. Shir HaShirim Asher Shlomo Yishakeni min shikot piu. Hashem kisses us. Why? Where does this love, great love, come from? What did we do to earn it? Normally love is earned, even though today maybe people don't think so. Ki tovim dodecha miyayin. Well, dodecha, its literal translation is your uncle, or in that context it could be something else also. But in Shir HaShirim, dodecha means Hashem, because God is better than wine. That's the way the Mefarshim explain the words in translation. And obviously it seems to be a little bit interesting. What does wine have to do with anything? That's the way Hashem loves you and shows you affection because He's better than wine. What does that mean? So, the rabbi that I heard the recording from I quoted once or twice from him in the past year. His name is Rav Chaim Zaid, if I'm pronouncing his name right. I don't know that much about him other than that I read a weekly Parsha sheet that he writes, an article in a Parsha sheet that he writes that I'm always very impressed by. And once in a while, I'll watch a clip or two that people send out of his. He's an Israeli rabbi, he talks in Hebrew. I don't know much about his background, but he definitely has an amazing smile and a wonderful, wonderful approach towards people that is extremely magnetic. And I don't know, he has his way with words. And he has the most mind-boggling stories ever. So for that alone, every week his writing is a story based on something that had to do with the Parsha. And first-hand stories, most of them, which I like better. And I've heard from friends of mine that know him very well that he's a huge Talmid Chacham and Yesh Shamayim and many, many accomplishments in life as well. So it's an honor to quote from somebody like that. And he brought down this pasuk. He didn't ask it as a question. He said it more as a fact, but I think it's the same thing. Really, the question just emphasizes the importance of understanding the pasuk. And he went through the stories, which I'll skip because I don't remember the details of them all, so I don't want to ruin it. It's just not fair to him. But the punchline was very important. Most of us either go to work or to college, or the lucky ones amongst us maybe go to learn in kollel. But all those three things, called first on the list, are not entertaining. You don't wake up at 6:30 in the morning and say, "Yay, I'm so excited, I'm about to go to work." That's not the normal way of the world. And if you do, then I wonder what type of job you have. Maybe now in the virtual world, people like going to work because they log in and don't do anything all day and log out and get paid for it. That could be. But in the real world, that's not, now there's more kids that love school than ever. They log into their Zoom and then they go play video games, and at the end of the day they log out, and life is beautiful. Until they get to try to get into a normal university and realize, oh my God, I didn't learn anything my whole life, this is not going to work. But in the real world, well, I think the majority, I don't have stats on this, and then there are stats on this, I just didn't have the time to look them up now before I walk downstairs. The majority of people maybe are okay with their job, but definitely not in love with it. So why do people go to work? Because you can't call the electric company and say, "I'm sorry, I don't like my job, therefore leave my electric on." It doesn't work like that. They have to get paid. And the same thing with your mortgage, and the same thing with your car lease, and everything else that you use in your life. And we all understand that. School. Some people are lucky, they go into fields that they like, and they're in a school that the environment they overall like, and they luck out with good professors that aren't liberal Jew haters. And so overall, it's a pleasant experience for them, because academics could be pleasant. To the point that in Halakha, it's brought down that if the discussion on Shabbat, you're not allowed to do divrei chol, things a weekday, and it's a very common question that students ask. They have big tests, and they want to know if they could study for their test on Shabbat. Now, of course, if the question is said in that context, the answer is no. But if the question is rephrased a little bit, and it's, are you allowed to read a science book on Shabbat? So the Mishnah Berurah says that if you have pleasure from the actual reading, meaning you would do it anyway, nothing to do with the test, you enjoy it, so then at that point, it would be permissible. Now, again, I'm not saying halakha for the public, ask your local rabbi if that's your technical question. I'm just using this as an example. Meaning there is an idea that some of us love academics, and at that point, academic things that stimulate the academic mind and the intellect elements are pleasurable. But those are far and few beyond. Most kids that go to school today, it's either because their parents forced them to, or because they just have to, it's society norms, or you can't really get a normal job without it. And as a result, they do what they got to do. Are they in love with it? No, but they do it anyway. Common denominator between the two is that they're making a sacrifice. Really, I want to play tennis, but instead I'm going to go to school because I want to have a future, and my future is more important than my tennis game. Or really, I want to stay home or go out with my friends today, but I'm going to go to work anyway because paying my bills this month is more important to me than hanging out with my friends this afternoon. Now, ultimately, in the perfect world, if I can get whatever I want, would I like to be with my friends today? Yes, but unfortunately, circumstances dictate otherwise. L'avdil, when it comes to Torah, it's not like that. The vast majority of those who learn full-time, it's because they want to, not because they have to. And learning Torah doesn't come easy. I think I said this here before. I was once on a debate in Israel, that was a public debate, against a politician who was advocating for a law to force yeshiva boys to go to the IDF. And first I covered the intellectual aspects of it, which was relatively easy. But of course he didn't admit, and he tried to play the emotional game of you guys do nothing and the soldiers work so hard. So I told him I'm willing to make a social experiment with him the next day on a condition that it's documented. So nobody could say, he said, she said, I don't like that word against word story. Those are very dangerous. So, and he agreed, surprisingly. I said, let's go to places that are considered uncomfortable military jobs. War zones, we'll call them. The Gaza border, there are people in the military that have it really good. They're in in divisions that they get paid a lot and are computer geeks and build up a career later on and get free schooling through the military. But I'm talking about those who are getting down and dirty and are at physical life risk and have every reason to say that they don't want to be there. And let's offer them a barter deal. That they can get a free pass, they can leave the military today. The same earnings, 800 and something shekel that they get in the IDF, they'll get wherever this new place that they're going to is. They'll be under no physical life danger, but they'll have to live the life of a yeshiva boy. And let's see if we can even find one that will agree to this deal. And he says, what do you mean? They'll all agree to it. I said, so you're so sure, let's go. So we went. Now, I always gave this example in theory. This was the first time that I had the opportunity to actually try this in reality. Most of them looked at me like I fell off the moon, and they were like, what's a yeshiva boy's life? And I started explaining them. And as soon as we didn't even get to mincha, we were just holding, like, by the end of first Seder, they're like, no, I'll stay in the army, it's fine. So obviously, these yeshiva boys and college students don't exactly have an easy life. They have a very demanding life that's very strenuous on many levels. But the majority of them happen to love it, because the Torah means so much to them that they love what they're doing. And at that point, it is a sacrifice, but it's a sacrifice that in a way is a little bit easier for them because of their great passion and love, and then add on to that the belief in the goal and the mission and the accomplishment that they have. But when we do make sacrifices for something, normally we make dividends. Now, how do we gauge how much sacrifice we're willing to make? The greater the dividend is, the larger the sacrifice you're willing to make is. Or the greater the need is, the larger the sacrifice you're willing to make is. It's a very interesting study that I don't know exactly how this was done on a practical level, but I guess it was reverse case study, we'll call it, based on trauma units around the US, of people that jumped off a third floor, jumped out of a window or a porch or whatever, 3 stories high. What percentage of them died, what percentage of them had what type of injuries, and so on. These studies are not done for just research sake. There's actually real reasons that they're done, and important reasons. It's a way of gauging risk, which affects many, many industries in the United States. First and foremost, trauma units and the medical world to understand what they have to be equipped and ready for, but as well as liability and risk factors and many other things. So they do this. Many universities have done studies like this, but this one specific one did a study on the reverse impacts of this problem. And in the study, they didn't only do the factual element of falling 3 stories, they also did the reasoning behind it. Now, there are many reasons that can happen. An accident, God forbid, we should never know. Somebody bent over a window and fell out. We've heard stories like that, especially with young children. In Israel, currently, there's a law that windows above a certain height have to have gates on them that are welded in because of that reason, because there were way too many tragedies that happened over the years, and they don't want the next to happen. Then there are very unfortunate stories, attempted suicides, which is, I wish I could say it's uncommon. Kind of a dumb way to die, but whatever. Why would you want to be splattered? Is that the goal in life? And there are other factors as well, beyond those 2. But those are the 2 most common ones that happen. Foul play and whatever. There are many others that come into play in these things. And then there's one more. And that was a strategically planned one for a need. What was the need? Fire. And this is actually the reason why this specific study was done. Many times, fire breaks out in a building, somebody's living on the 3rd floor, the first 2 floors are in flames, and if he doesn't get out within the next 30 or 90 seconds, the flames are going to bust through where he is, and that's going to be the end of him. And if not, smoke inhalation will kill him also. So he has to get out. Now, of course, the fire departments have equipment and many things to try to get people out, but when the time is against you and that's not applicable, at that point he has to jump out. And this is done for assessed risk, saying that the risk of him jumping out in certain ways is a lot less than the risk of him staying in even a few more seconds. And they found something that's fascinating, that those that jumped out of buildings due to fire or military causes, which is another example, soldiers that came under surprise attack or whatever, their injury levels were drastically less than those who jumped out either accidentally or initially. The explanation of this was that it was gauged, and if it's gauged, there was more preparation or whatever. In reality, that was proven to be wrong in psychology because the amount of time, the window of time, doesn't allow you to gauge anything. So then they came out with what they call instinctive behaviors. And when somebody does something instinctively from a healthy place, not from an unhealthy place, it actually works to the opposite extreme from an unhealthy place, then it plays to his benefit in protecting him in a physical way, which is a fascinating thing. There's a lot of studies done about this. You can go, ask your local professors or go to your local library. You can read hours and hours and hours of material, which is extremely interesting, the way the mind and body connection works. Now, I'm not saying people that jumped out because of a fire didn't get injured. Many of them did, and many of them got injured extremely badly. But this is all numbers. In proportion to the ones who did it otherwise, they were better off in the big scheme of things. Military wouldn't be such an indicator for my example because they're actually trained for these things, so that's different. The average layman is not trained to jump out of a building. It was argued on how to conclude this fact, but I'm going to give you my perspective on it, even though I'm not a psychologist and not a researcher. I just think it's simple logic. When one is in need, based on the level of desperation of his need, is the power that his body now can operate under. It's an amazing thing. A lot of us consider, well, I don't know us, I shouldn't say that for you guys. Maybe you guys all feel six-pack, macho men, whatever. I'm not. I hate the gym. To me, the fact that gyms have been closed for half a year now, I didn't even know about it, as they say. I heard about it in theory. In a way, I love it because that's my excuse. I can't go to the gym. What should I do? But in reality, that's not my forte. It's a matter of personal taste. Some people love the gym, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually a good thing. It's healthy. But one way or the other, I don't consider myself to be physically strong on any level. But, thank God for Instacart and food deliveries and whatever, so you don't have to be carrying all these bags and boxes and everything home because I don't know how well I would do with that. To that extreme. But it's an interesting thing. In a moment of truth, and unfortunately, or fortunately, because God decided so, I've been in moments of truth like that in my life, whether it was on my way to Ma'arat HaMachpelah when two people tried to take my life, or even across the street in my own home a few years ago in Jersey when on a Motzei Sukkot, when two people from, well, today got to be politically correct, but let's just say from the Latin American community, or Latin community period, I'm not sure. I'm assuming they're illegal aliens, one way or the other. One came with a gun and one came with a knife to mug me for $200. So I've been in a couple of situations like that. And I realized a mind-boggling thing. On a normal day, if somebody would tell me that such a thing would happen, I'd be like, oh my God, I don't know what I would do. Let me tell you a little secret. I'll tell you the story behind, and pointless, just for the entertainment reasons, behind this incident that happened in New Jersey. It was Motzei Sukkot. We were going to take down the sukkah. At the end, we decided not to because it was night and we were tired after Simchat Torah, and everybody was drained. And then sometimes when you're overtired, you don't fall asleep. It's about 2:33 in the morning. I'm not falling asleep, and I see that somebody's trying to reach me from Israel, a person who I knew, and it's important. So I decided to go and pick up the phone. We had a house full of guests. I didn't want to wake anybody up, so even to go down to the dining room and talk, I was scared maybe somebody would hear it would wake somebody up. It's not fair. So I went outside. I went across the street. Across the street there was a public school from where I lived at the time, large empty field. And I was on the phone and just walking around on the phone by the public school. And a couple of minutes in, I had put on some clothes, and a couple of minutes in, these two guys come to me, one with a gun, one with a knife, and they tell me in this broken English, and that's how I knew they were Latin, or Guatemalan, I later found out, give us your money. Now, I'm not sure if, based on what they decided, I had money at all, but happened to be, I had a couple $100 on it. Now, I don't know how to explain this. The normal thing to do is just give me a few $100. Hopefully they leave, and that's the end of it. My instincts worked otherwise on the spot. Maybe that's credit to being affiliated with Israeli Defense Forces in my life in one way or the other. And I made a quick assessment, which only in retrospect I made the assessment. The knife I was a lot less scared of, and the gun was a 50-50. I said either they got a hold of a gun illegally, because there's no legal way they have a gun, or it's just fake, which is very probable. The vast majority of these incidents, at least in the state of New Jersey, are done with fake guns. I said, but one way or the other, I got to neutralize the guy with the gun first. That was my thinking. Now, don't try this. It's not smart. Why I did this in retrospect, it makes no sense. But let's just say I did what I had to do, and in a couple of quick moves, the guy with the gun was on the floor, the gun was on the side. I realized quickly there was cement there, it didn't make a noise. It was fake. It was a plastic water gun that he painted black to use as a threat. At that point, I was very calm. I knew the knife, at the worst case is a kitchen knife, maybe not even that. His friend sees his friend down. Now he's in trouble. Tries to come to me. At the end, decides not to. When he goes to help his friend, I leave. I don't go into my house. I had a neighbor 2 doors down who, let's just say, is very brave and for different reasons that aren't exactly the right reasons. And I went towards his house, figuring if they want to come after me, this guy's my friend, he'll already speak their language the way they do things. And they ended up running off. One went limping off, one went running off, but one way or the other. And incident over. When I see they're far enough that they don't see me, I go back into my house and I call 911. The local police department are acquainted with me. They come over and they're like, give us descriptions. I give them the descriptions. I said, it's on a public school property. I'm sure there are cameras. You could probably get that too. And they're like, yeah, we'll look for them and whatever. Okay. They take my cell phone number and the night goes on. That night I hear nothing. The next morning, one of the gentlemen that was staying by me, who's originally from Spain, a wonderful gentleman, he had worked for me at the time, said, last night we were lazy, we didn't take down the sukkah, today let's take down the sukkah and put it away. And I told him, yeah, sure, but you know what, it's back-breaking work, let's be real. Let's go to the place where the workers are and pick up a few guys and let them take down the sukkah. We'll just supervise, it'll cost $100, $200, big deal. We go to the place, we pick up 2 workers, they sit in the back. I wasn't paying much attention. He spoke to them in their language and they negotiated a price. I think it was $10 an hour that they agreed to come for. I'm driving to the house. I'm like 2 doors down from the house. And this guy speaks many languages and he turns to me and he says, do these 2 guys in the back know you? And he says it in Hebrew. And I said, I don't think so. Why do you say that? He said, because they just said, oh no, here's where we were last night. And I look in the rearview mirror and I'm like, oh my God. And I was like, that was a quick recovery for Mr. Fake Gun. And now I tell him in Hebrew the incident briefly, and he's like, what do you want to do? I'm like, no, we won't bring them through the house, we'll bring them to the porch and I'll call the cops. And I thought, great, now we'll get them off the street. I call the police department, I tell whoever's on duty who picks up the phone the story. In short, he already knew about it from the records of the night before. And he tells me, listen, I'm sending a cop, but not to your house. 4 or 5 doors down, walk over there. I want him to speak to you in person first. I thought this is maybe some investigation tactic, right? That's what I was assuming. I go over to where he told me to. Officer shows up, Amar Kaur, comes out of the car and says, I want to talk to you. If you want me to arrest them, gladly. That's what they deserve, and they deserve to rot in jail and be deported and whatever else. But, let me tell you the facts. The facts are they will get released probably within 3 or 4 hours. And once they get released, they're going to want revenge, and that's going to put your entire family and children at risk. That is a crazy thing to do. You have nothing to benefit, everything to lose. If I would be you, I would just let it go, let them finish their work, pay them their money, and send them off on their merry way. And that was the advice from, and this was before Black Lives Matter protests. This story goes back many, many, many years. Showed me the perspective on why crime exists in the United States, and obviously today in New York, why crime exists to such extremes. There's no consequence anyway, so why not? The police department advises you not to prosecute. They're like, and it's true. If you think about it, they meant my good. These officers are very honest people, and they really meant the good of my family and myself. What do you need this for? But what do you need this for? It made the world crazy. Point being that, well, the story was just for the incident, but on a general day, if somebody would tell me that I'd be able to get into some sort of fight with two people, one with, at the end we know, a fake gun, and the other one with probably a fake knife, I would probably say no. No way I would survive that. But when you're in a moment of crisis, God gives a person strength beyond means. The easiest way to know that this is a rule that is straight across the board is anybody who was an ex-military person and was in combat zones will tell you when they were under active fire or anything like that, they had what we would call superhuman powers on a regular day. They had power in them and fight in them and whatever that just doesn't make sense. This really comes from that God created us in a way that we have an unbelievable amount of physical strength and mental strength, and it's really mind over matter, so our mental strength is the prime element of our physical strength beyond how much we work out or not. And we just don't tap into those resources because A, we don't know how to, and B, it's not needed. In time of truth, Hashem gives us the ability to tap into those resources. Meaning that would be the second scenario. Based on your level of desperation is the level of strength you have to counterattack that level of desperation. Okay. Now let's take these principles and go back to what Reb Chaim said, Reb Chaim Zaid, beautiful pshat. Yishakeni min shikot piyu. Hashem shows us the ultimate act of affection and love. Why? Ki tovim dodecha miyayin. Because at every given moment of the day, I have to make a choice. Do I choose to go with the route of yayin, meaning doing whatever I want, living a reckless life, letting my ego take control of my behavior, letting my animalistic instincts take control of my behavior? Is that the route I choose? Or do I choose to make a sacrifice? Yeah, right now I really want to go out with my friends. I don't really want to go to listen to Torah. But I'm going to sacrifice going out with my friends, the yain, for the sake of dodecha, because I would rather hear Dvar Hashem. I'd rather listen to Hashem's words. Unbelievable. Hashem in return reciprocates and says, you're willing to make such great sacrifices for me, I am willing to show you huge acts of affection towards you. And the reason why I use the word show you as opposed to repay you is because God is giving it to us either way. We're constantly getting paid by God. We just don't always acknowledge it. Many of us take life for granted. And it's not our fault. It's the society we were raised in. Society at large, I don't mean a specific community. The world at large is a world of entitlement. Everybody thinks they're entitled to everything. And when you're raised in that environment, obviously, entitlement's going to dictate your behavior and everything else in your life. In that environment, to be one who's willing to make sacrifices for another is a very foreign concept. Because if I'm a narcissist and the world runs around me, why should I make a sacrifice for someone else? That doesn't add up. Unless there's something in it for me. Most sacrifices that are made today are very fake. If it's a feel-good thing, or if you're a hero, or whatever, I love the signs, hero lives here. The real heroes are unsung heroes. People that nobody ever heard about and nobody even knew existed. But at the end of the day, today, in the smallest act we do, that has to do with staying grounded to normal ethics and kal vachomer 1,000 times over to what Hashem wants from us, is a great sacrifice. Because in comparison to what we are surrounded with, or the odds, yeah, it takes a lot of effort. A lot more effort than it ever took. On a day-to-day basis, it's very hard to live with it, because there's so much chaos and struggle and confusion in a person's life, and we live life at such a fast pace, definitely on the East Coast, that losing focus is very easy. But kitovim dodecha, when you understand how good God is, so miyayin, when you come to the test of wine, it's very easy to beat it. And I want to share with you an expression of feelings that someone said last night, who I know who the gentleman is, but I don't know, I didn't hear it live. There's a principal in a school in the town I live in, his name is Rabbi Zions, wonderful man. I know him for a lot of years. I don't know exactly how many, but I'm guessing about 16 or 17 years. 16 years probably. Wonderful man, really wonderful man. One of the brilliant educators of our generation as well, who told over a little bit about his daughter. His daughter works in an office that I have family members that work in that company as well, and they witnessed this part of the story. Regular, healthy young woman, young 30s, everything okay, or at least so she thought, and was at work one day, and in the work there's like a little, we'll call it a cafeteria. It's not a literal cafeteria, it's like a kitchen area where the work provides snacks and drinks or whatever for their employees. She's sitting by her desk and she's complaining that she feels a little lightheaded, she's not really feeling so well. One of the workers told her, maybe your sugar levels are low, maybe you didn't eat, maybe that. Go to the cafeteria, we'll call it, and get yourself something to eat. And she did. But this worker saw when she was walking there, she was like a little wobbly, like she wasn't completely there. And they tell her, do you want us to call Hatzalah for you, or do you need help, or is something wrong? Or she's like, no, I'll be fine, I'm tired. You know, most people don't make much out of these type of things. And maybe even rightfully so in general. Thank God, and this is miracle number one, that this employee was enough of a decent person not to let her walk alone, and went together with her to this room. She quickly saw that basic things like holding and just basic body movements aren't working the right way, and she's physically like falling apart. Call someone else to the room right away. They sit her down. They call Hatzalah, and then they call her husband as well and say, maybe you want to come over. Your wife's not feeling well. And Hatzalah very quickly says, straight to the hospital. Your vitals are terrible. Everything's off. She goes to the hospital. She was in some sort of active cardio situation, and within less than a few hours, the doctor said there's only one way to save her life, and that's for her to get a heart transplant. She went from sitting by a desk and working on a regular day to finding out that she needs a heart transplant. A long series of miracles. I don't think he shared all the details, but she ended up getting a heart transplant within a very short period of time. I don't know exactly, I don't remember the exact window, but under a month. Currently she's home and healthy. Recovering, obviously, but home and healthy, against all odds. And he was sharing this story about what he's been through. And his way of expressing the story was, many of you spent your summers on all different vacations and trips and beaches and whatever else. And I hope you all enjoyed it. Others may have spent it a little frustrated that there were some restrictions and many normal attractions and camps and other things were closed. And as a result, the regular summer routine wasn't able to be done. And for those that feel frustrated as a result of that, I want to tell you where I spent my summer. And then he went on to saying the story with his daughter, which I had already known part of it, the initial part of it, and saying my summer was spent in Columbia Hospital, hoping that my daughter gets a heart and that the transplant works well and her body doesn't reject it, and that one day she'll be home alive. So even if your summer didn't work out exactly the way you wanted it to, I think you would have not wanted to change places with me. Now, I don't believe that somebody who has a greater problem makes my problem smaller. So I don't think that was his point either, by the way. But I do believe this. Before Rosh Hashanah, many of us are busy discussing how bad this year was and how hard, and especially this year. With COVID and everything else, how crazy. Unbelievable. Here's a fascinating thing that somebody told me. I don't know the facts well enough because I'm not in that industry, but somebody shared this with me this past Friday night, and I honestly hope that this is precise information. One of the industries, obviously, that was greatly impacted at the beginning of COVID was the jewelry industry, which is primarily Indians and Jews in the United States, at least. On Friday night, somebody who's very big in the industry mentioned to me that it's amazing how Hashem has his ways. He said, not only did COVID impact us, prior to that, the prices of diamonds went down many times, and many other factors, and we were an industry that never thought would come back alive again. Like we thought, it's literally over. And these are people that this is all they know. They've been in this industry 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Sometimes it's father, son, and grandson. And it was very traumatic for them. Very, very traumatic for them. The worry, the fear, the panic, the trying to diversify portfolios, but it's not so easy to do. Then COVID hit. You couldn't even do anything at that point. Everything went wrong. And he tells me, in Manhattan right now, there are only two things that are making money. Jewelry and 99-cent stores. Because different sectors, we don't want to get in trouble, so we won't say who, are getting 600, by now I think it's only 400, but originally $600 free a week, plus a whole bunch of other free money to make sure that they never work a day in their life, like they never probably did either. And those people like wearing flashy things. They call it bling. They want something that'll... And they're coming to the Diamond District, the ones that didn't get a chance to loot, and they're buying and buying and buying and buying and buying. And sales are up in crazy numbers. This one specific gentleman who shared this thing with me told me what I didn't do in Christmas and Valentine's Day in the past 3 years combined, those are the two busiest seasons normally, I did in the past 3 weeks alone. And then I asked a few other guys in the industry and they told me the same thing. It was mind-boggling. I wanted to show everybody. You thought you had power, yeah, Christmas is this, that's what's going to help you. Boom, you were dead year after year, prices weren't good. And now exactly when it makes no sense, some community that wasn't your client ever is suddenly going to have more money than they ever have and have no concept of saving money. And therefore they're going to go and spend it and buy and do it, and that's going to salvage your industry. Hopefully that happens to all industries in America, especially those that Yehudim are the ones that dominate strongly. But it's an amazing, it's a fascinating thing the way it works. But what did this gentleman point out? Exactly this. He says this was a test of emunah. We were all people that came to shul on Shabbat at least and bought aliyot and gave charity and did different things. And in the past year, it didn't make sense to continue doing it anymore. Because financially, there was no new income. If anything, there was only losses. And we continued anyway. Because it was in our DNA. This is what we did all the years, and this is what we continued. Hashem said, Ki tovim dodecha, if my Torah, if your aliyah, if your blessing, if your was worth more than what otherwise should have been, protecting your assets, miyayin, from your physical things, then yishakeni min shikot piyu, the beginning of the pasuk. I will show you great affection against all odds. I will turn your industry at a time that nobody thinks there's a hope for it into a very prosperous industry. You'll make up in 3 or 4 weeks, 3 years of sales. I told them by the blessing of Shemitah, it says, the people that aren't on the highest level of emunah, they're somewhere in the middle, they get a blessing that v'tziviti birkati, that they make 3 years in a short period of time. That's exactly what happened there. Hashem gave you that blessing, exactly that blessing. I said, I bless you that you should have a higher level of emunah of that you won't even need that anymore. But it's an amazing thing. So, why is this such a beautiful chidush? Besides the fact that it's a beautiful pshat in a pasuk, it's a very critical chidush for this time of the year. Everybody's looking for some sort of, I guess, insurance policy or security blanket or whatever you want to call it for Rosh Hashanah Kippur. Especially this year, Rosh Hashanah Kippur, which is a little bit of an interesting Rosh Hashanah Kippur. I'm starting to get annoyed by my groups of how many times they post, you got to register here and there. And I don't know. Not really sure what that means. And if we got to a point in Jewish history that Jews have to register to be part of a synagogue, that's pretty traumatic and sad, and maybe that's even worse than the destruction of the Second Temple. That's destroying every Jewish value that ever existed. We want our synagogues to have as many people as possible, and to have as much love as possible, and as many diverse people as possible, not members only. We're the opposite extreme of members only. We do anything for everybody at all times. We don't have members or membership, for that matter. Because adarabah, So if we got to a point that some law or some, I guess, mayor who really all he is a puppet of God, but if God allows some insane person with an agenda to try and restrict synagogues, that's, so this Rosh Hashanah is a very awkward Rosh Hashanah. So definitely, if on a regular year we want some sort of insurance, this year we want 10 times, a tenfold of insurance. And this would be one of the insurances. Yishakeni min shikot piyu, everybody wants God to give them the ultimate act of affection in His judgment. Ki tovim dodecha miyayin. Is there something that you're willing to sacrifice for Hashem? What is there that you're willing to sacrifice for Hashem? I'm going to tell you a story, just not to learn from it on a practical level, because I don't think it applies to any of us. We're not there. But just to show you the idea. I have an acquaintance who lives in New Jersey somewhere, and la'aleinu v'la'alechem, his daughter got very sick with cancer. But they caught it at very advanced stages and tried a few things. It wasn't looking very good. And he decided that he's going to take 2 days to go to Israel. This story happened about 2 years ago. To go pray by his parents' grave and somewhere else and whatever. And he wanted to get a blessing from Chaim Kanievsky. Those were the things that were on his mind. And I wasn't so comfortable with him leaving. His daughter was really in bad shape, but he was determined to do it. His wife made a good point that if he doesn't do it, then God forbid something happens to the girl, I'll always feel maybe if I would have went, then it would have been better. He should go. And he went. He went to Israel, he went to pray. He told me the destinations. I don't remember. I just remember him saying his parents' grave. His father was a big tzaddik. But there were other destinations as well. It was a relatively short trip. And then he knew somebody who made him an official time, and more than just like a 1 second walk by, to speak to Reb Chaim Kanievsky. And he went to Reb Chaim, and he didn't know, or I guess they didn't tell him by the entrance, Reb Chaim Kanievsky is of the opinion that a man can't wear a watch, al pi halacha. Now again, this is not applicable for us. This is Reb Chaim's opinion based on a Chazon Ish, that a watch is considered a tachshit, a piece of jewelry, and jewelry is meant for women, not for men. So normally, before you go into Reb Chaim's house, the gabayim or the grandsons, whatever, tell you take your watch off. It's like a respect thing. He's against it, don't do it. Nobody told him. And he went into Reb Chaim's house, and he was wearing a watch. And Reb Chaim he told her, he spilled out his heart to Reb Chaim. His daughter's very sick, and what's going to be, and this and that, and he should give him a blessing. He should give her a blessing to get better. Reb Chaim told him he doesn't know if the daughter's sick or the father's sick. And he almost fainted, because God forbid, if Reb Chaim says something like that, maybe he sees something, to him that was traumatic. So, out of desperation, he said, "What do you mean?" And Reb Chaim said, "You're wearing ladies' clothing." He didn't understand, because he didn't know that Reb Chaim had this opinion. So Reb Chaim pointed to his watch. He said, "That's jewelry. You can't wear it." So he said, "Okay," and he starts taking it off. And he takes it off, and Reb Chaim tells him, "Leave it here." I wonder if he was wearing a Patek Philippe or not, how much the loss was that day. And what he meant to tell him is, and he said he's going to find a almana aniyah to give it to, a poor widow, because in his mind it's a female thing. And the guy, Reb Chaim said he had no problem with it, he was more than happy. And then Reb Chaim told him, "Fine, up until now you lived backwards. So your daughter's health was backwards. Now you're living normal, your daughter's health will be normal." And he sent him on his way. In less than 5 weeks, his daughter was home, healthy, everything was gone as if it never happened. Without surgery. Without anything. At that point, the surgery wasn't even an option, her condition was so bad. Now again, I'm not saying the link for sure is not for anybody, and I don't think the watch had anything to do with it. I think when Reb Chaim says something, Sarat Torah, so it comes out of his mouth, Hashem makes it happen, period. But to this man, because he's an American Jew and never even heard of this idea, surprisingly, as trivial as it sounds, giving up wearing a watch for the rest of his life is a big sacrifice. Because forget about the element of showing off a fancy watch, just the practical thing. I'm not a watchman for a while, and I'm not rushing to become one again because of this. But this is not a psak halacha. Obviously, most poskim hold otherwise. But that was on this gentleman's level, that was a great sacrifice. And a combination of a person showing Hashem, even though it's so far-fetched to me and it makes no sense and it's not something I should do, and the blessing of Sarat Torah, the man who probably learns and knows the most Torah alive today, the koach HaTorah and the koach of the sacrifice of a person, Yishakeni min shikot piu. At that point, Hashem says, Ki tovim dodecha miyayin. If I'm worth more than yayin, if you're willing to give up something for me, then I'm willing to save you. I'm willing to help you. And we see this in life over and over again. Now obviously, we have to start with the basics. So, for one person, putting on tefillin for 30 seconds a day even, is a big sacrifice, because he has no patience. So that would be a good place to start. It's funny to me that many people are busy reading Tehillim and Shir Shirim and Zgulot, but they don't put on tefillin in the morning, or if they're a woman, she wears pants. Now, I'm not making fun of it, so at least they do something. But get your priorities straight. So we got to start with the basics and make sure we stick to the basics. Probably one of the greatest sacrifices that one can make is walking away from a group of people that are gossiping. I don't know if there's any greater sacrifice possible to make for the sake of God. Because the human instinct is to love gossip. And the human instinct is also not to be an outcast. And if people are gossiping and you walk away, you're the outcast at that point. Because today gossip is the mainstream revenue of the media of the world, which controls the world. Can you imagine in Shamayim what that does for you before Rosh Hashanah? If you were sitting around on Friday night and people start gossip and you couldn't get them to stop and you said, okay, I'll come back when you're done. In a polite, respectful way, obviously, without fighting, no confrontation, because then it's counterproductive. Can you imagine what that does in heaven for you? Maybe your entire life was just made in that one action at that moment. Because you made a sacrifice for Hashem, and Hashem says, you sacrificed for me, ki tovim dodecha miyayin. That's the way it works. There's a big lesson before Rosh Hashanah. Hashem says, lefanai malchuyot kadesh tamlichuni aleichem. Say malchuyot for me on Rosh Hashanah, that you should make me a king. If you had the opportunity to go see somebody who you considered great, in my world, let's say, one of our Gdolei Yisrael, Chaim Kanievsky, Shalom Cohen. I told you have a private hour of Chaim, but it's going to come at an expense. You're going to have to get a flight during COVID, which is not so simple, and you'll have to go take a whole bunch of tests in America and in Israel and this, and be in whatever they call it over there in Israel, bidud for 14 days, and the whole ordeal. But at the end of all that headache and financial expense, you'll have a private hour of Chaim Kanievsky. You'll be able to talk to them about anything in the world you want. If I had to bet, everybody in this room would jump on the offer. What do you mean? But you're going to be in a room with, in Israel, it's not like here that quarantine means that you're vaguely in some sort of town. Quarantine over there is that you have to prove that you have a bedroom that has an attached bathroom that nobody else has access to. It's a prison cell, practically. That's a big sacrifice. But look at the result. Everybody wants to see Reb Chaim. Hashem says, realize that the only reason why Reb Chaim is because of me. Because he's learning my Torah. And I'm Melech HaOlam. So if that's what you'd be willing to do to see Reb Chaim for an hour, and spend an hour with him, you could spend an hour with me every day. And it doesn't take quarantining, and it doesn't take any... Just open a Gemara, just open a Tehillim, just open a Chumash. You're spending an hour with me. What's the big deal? All right, Chazal say, somebody's studying Torah, Shechina kenegdo. The Shechina is sitting opposite him. Hashem learns with you chavruta, whether you're a male, female, God doesn't discriminate. You're studying Torah, He's with you. He's sitting and studying with you. You're reading Tehillim, He's reading it with you. He's sitting across from you. That's why I'm going to make a side comment. It troubles me a little bit when I see people reading Tehillim with their feet up on the couch and as if they're on some sort of vacation on the beach. If Hashem's sitting opposite you, that's the way you sit. Sit with respect. Reb Kanievsky once told me that whenever she reads Tehillim, and no, this is already extreme, that's for people that were on her level. She always reads it standing. She says, if Hashem's in the room, how could I sit down? Now, of course, that's a very high level. We're not on that level. And I specify that, so nobody should get any crazy ideas in their head. Extremism isn't good. But she was a tzaddikus, on her level, that's what she was up to. But yeah, it really, I see it sometimes, and it troubles me. Boys, girls, makes no difference. You're already doing something beautiful. Shabbat afternoon, instead of wasting your time, you're reading some Tehillim. Feet up, laying back like a drunk on the couch. For what? Sit by the table like a normal person. Read Tehillim like a mensch. Yeah. You're sitting with Fnei HaMelech. Hashem is literally learning with you. Now you have the same thing when it comes to shul. If you already came to shul, which is not easy for a lot of people, then don't make a mockery out of it. Don't be mizalzel in the synagogue. Have respect. Beit Hashem nelech beragesh. Go with emotion, with an understanding. You're an omed b'fnei HaMelech. You're standing in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And don't look at it as a stress. It's not a stress. It's a privilege. You're so lucky. Most people can't stand in front of the king and talk to him face to face like that. You do have the opportunity to do it. So do it, and do it in the right way. And if you can't sit 3 hours like that because it's too much for you, so come for 10 minutes. It's better to be in shul 10 minutes respectfully than 3 hours not respectfully. That's for sure. And we lose our feeling for the basic things that have to do with Judaism. Somebody called me and asked me this week if I would learn with him chavruta. So I told him my schedule's kind of demanding, but if you're willing to work around my schedule, yeah, I'd take it into consideration. But how often and how long do you want to learn for? So he tells me once every second week for 20 minutes. I said, that's not the end of the world to find once in 14 days on the phone or on FaceTime or whatever to learn. Somehow we could work it out. I said, I would take it into consideration. I said, I'm not committing now until after Sukkot there's nothing to talk about, but we can revisit the subject after Sukkot and maybe we'll take it into consideration. And then he tells me, but I want to do 5 minutes of just chit-chatting and 15 minutes of learning. So I told him, all right, forget the idea, hire somebody else. Oh, no, I said it was, sorry. So he says, what do you mean? I said, it happens to be that deep down I know that for you chit-chatting is more important than the learning because you need a little chizuk in life. And I'll gladly call you on random occasions to chit-chat with you. There's nothing wrong with that, that's beautiful. But to openly say that we're learning, but in reality do the opposite, that's already making fun of Hashem. The needs are the needs, and they should be done, and they should be done the way they need. But to openly say that, I'm going to shul to hang out. Don't go to shul, it's Hashem's house, what are you doing? Show respect to Hashem's house, basic respect. And here's a bigger sensitivity, which is, by the way, the halakha talks about it, but most people don't pay attention to these things. When you walk around your house, if there's a room that has a bookshelf of Sifrei Kodesh, make sure you're dressed accordingly. How do you stand in front of a shas that talks about the way you're supposed to behave when you're doing the opposite extreme of that? How much of a hypocrite could a person be? There's a limit to being a hypocrite. Now again, I don't say a person should be a prisoner in his home. Do whatever the halakha permits, in any way. But the Sfarim should have a sacred place. Some people have the merit that they're able to put a bookcase in a public place in the house because people behave like that in their house. Other people don't have that merit, okay, but at least don't embarrass them. I once saw something now, the Barditcheva side of me, of course, made a big deal out of this in Limud Zchut, but the practical side of me wasn't so at ease with this. I once witnessed something that, I'm not sure how to describe it, but there's certain things that we say only in Israel, so this is one of those only in Israel moments. I go into a cab one morning, and this was years, 7, 8 years ago, and I still took cabs in Israel before I started realizing that maybe renting cars is a better option. I used to think that it's better to take cabs, even though it's much more expensive, because I sit for hours and hours with the drivers, so then I could bring them closer to Judaism. So it's worth it for me to spend the money to have that opportunity. But I'm primarily in Jerusalem, and right now 65 to 70% of the drivers in Jerusalem are Muslim. I'm not interested in getting closer to Muslims, so for that, I have nothing against them. They're my cousins, but that doesn't interest me. They're my cousins from afar. At that point, I'm not interested. But at the time that there was still Shomer Shabbat cab companies, otherwise known as ran and owned by Jews, that don't want. So I used to take taxis. And one day I'm in a cab, and fine, the guy's driving me. We were going Miron, Tzfat, Amuka, and Tveria. It's a full day, 16, 17 hour work, which the guy, of course, was happy about. There's a lot of money for him, a lot of driving, and a lot of. And on the way, we're talking, and I try to stick in of Shimon Bar Yochai's grave, this grave, that grave, where I'm going, why I'm going, tell him stories about that, hoping maybe it'll open his Jewish heart a little. And he was actually very interested. He was all into it. It was like, I drove so many customers along the years to Miron, I never even knew what Miron was, I always stay in the car. And this time when we get there, I'm going to come in with you. Fine. All right, we get to Miron, and he comes in. I'll tell you what, I was jealous of him. He read Tehillim with so much passion, with so much emotion. I wish my Tehillim looked like that. I mean that literally. Ad hayom, years later, every time I say over the story, I still have chills in my body from what I saw him reading Tehillim. His whole neshama was in the Tehillim. All right? I prayed Mincha and Arvit. It was evening time when we were there. I said some Tehillim as well. Prayed a little bit. I told him, okay, we're ready to go. We go. And when we come into the car, he tells me, it was such an amazing experience. He's so happy that, I made him aware of what this is and that. And he always knew a lot about Tehillim, because his grandfather used to read a ton of Tehillim and his grandmother and that. And that's why he was so emotional. It was like he was reconnecting. I thought he was reconnecting with God, but let's say that's an indirect way of reconnecting with God. And I'm like happy that maybe it was worth the 17 or 1800 shekel he's about to get paid when he drops me off in the hotel in Jerusalem, because we gave a Jew a moment of tshuva ma'asim tovim. Then he tells me, being that it's such a good moment, and he's feeling so good, do I mind if he puts on music? I said, listen, as long as it's normal music. He says, yeah, only normal music. 40 seconds in, I don't want to even tell you what went on. Now he doesn't even mean bad, the poor guy. To him it's so innocent. But so I paused, I told him, can you lower it for a second and then we'll discuss if it should stay on or not? He said, sure. He's very respectful, nicest driver. Lowers the music, he says, what do you want? I said, did you hear just the first 2 sentences of the lyrics that were just sung? So he said, yeah, it's one of my favorite songs. So I purposely put it on. I'm on a high now. It's one of my favorites. I said, I want to ask you something. You were just reading Tehillim inside. Don't you see the paradox in that? Isn't there like a direct contradiction? This is your way of celebrating your Tehillim? The opposite extreme of what you read that David HaMelech said? So, I'm not judging you. I don't think you mean bad. I actually think you mean good. And that's what I said. If I would say my Baditchev aside, could you imagine what the Baditchev Rebbe would have done with such a story? Here's a Yid that is an Avi Avot Tumah, but he goes to read Tehillim with such a passion because he finally connected to Hashem Vayachai. But in the practical element, it's a little bit of a slap in the face to David HaMelech and to God. Like that's the way. Now, I'm not saying he has his nishiyat. This is his life. Fine, but let's make a big wall, a big mechitza, and differentiate. Now I'm behaving the way I should, and now my Yitzhak took over. What should I do? But at least that much. I think that's a big part of Hashem's message in El. Hashem doesn't think that we're becoming tzaddikim. He saw the game of Rosh Hashanah Kippur all the years that we were alive. I don't even think he thinks we're changing much. I think he's just looking to see, are you willing to make one sacrifice for me? Just one. Even though maybe it's not so perfect or so convenient, are you willing to make one sacrifice for me? And again, I stress, because otherwise it's counterproductive. If the sacrifice is that you're going to start reading Shia Shi'im or Perek Shia or whatever, don't do it. It's a lot better without. That's the worst thing in the world. Then people feel holy and they do all the averot in the world, and it's bad news. I'm about the basics, the basic Tayag mitzvot, to start from the Alaves, to keep kosher, to keep Shabbat, to keep kashrut, tzniut, mamish the Alaves. To start from the basics. And when I say kosher, real kosher, not, fortunately in most restaurants in a lot of towns, the only thing that's kosher in them is the sign. You could eat the sign if you want. But, kosher with a standard. Has some sort of letters on it. By now people don't care if it has an OR or an OU or whatever. It has letters, yeah, it's good, fine. Close enough. I actually had a cute incident on Tuesday. I was at work. And I was in a meeting with a bunch of people. One of the people was an accountant. I didn't know until that day that he was Jewish, but we were talking about follow-up meetings and scheduling. And he said that Rosh Hashanah, he's off for those 2 days. It's Saturday, Sunday anyway, but okay. Yeah. He's not available to work. And the same thing on Yom Kippur. That's the first time I realized this guy's Jewish. I've been dealing with him for years. I just never minded his business, and his name didn't sound like that. He never mentioned Judaism in any way. So I told him, well, I didn't mean it literally, but I was trying to pick his brain, and I had to look for a back way to do it. I said, what's Rosh Hashanah different than any Saturday? And by the way, you should just know, now that I figured out that you're Jewish, you work for us. If there's ever an email on a Saturday, that's the end of your job. You can't do work for us on Shabbat or Jewish holidays. So he says, yeah, the whole year is too much for me and whatever. But Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, that's the high holidays, that's important, whatever. That he observes. That he observes. So I told him, how do you observe it? So he tells me which temple he goes to, and who's the choir, and who's the rabbi, it's a she, and who's the this, and that, the whole thing. That's what he knows, he doesn't know better. Tinok shenishba. So I told him, I want to understand the paradox in what you're saying over there. I got to get it. If there's a God in the world and the Torah is true, so what's Shabbat different than Rosh Hashanah? It's the same Torah that says to keep Shabbat, and the same Torah says to... And if it's not true, so, there's better theater than the Reform Temple. So I can tell you. And they're reopening in New Jersey on Friday. It'll be open before Rosh Hashanah. So just go watch a movie somewhere else. Doesn't it seem like a little bit of a contradiction to you? So he says, no, it's okay, because it's more or less. More or less, at least I have a connection. So I said, okay, this is an intelligent guy, and now he's talking like a 2-year-old, so what do I tell him? So I didn't say anything. I said, Chazal say, the same way there's a mitzvah to say something that somebody's going to listen to. If you think somebody's not going to listen, don't say anything. I didn't say a word. Work continues, people are getting frustrated there, we have to work with, this is not a shiur now. And then somebody else brings up the topic of if there's going to be a vaccine, if not, then when it's coming out, and if we should take it or we shouldn't take it, or we this or we that. And they look at me, because I'm the only one with pharmacy background, and they said if there's a vaccine, they named the specific company that they knew I had affiliation with in my career. And I said, would you take it? I said, I'd be the first to take it. Now again, I'm not telling anybody what to do. There's not a pro-vax, anti-vax. Russian vaccines are kind of scary, honestly, but whatever. So this guy pops up and says, I would never take it, and it's not proven. And I said, first of all, it is proven. It's going to be past phase 3 trial. But yeah, it's rushed. I agree with you on that part. He says, yeah, these type of things are too dangerous. I said, why? He says, we got to make sure that something's safe on all angles. So I said, maybe I could say that, but you can't say that. So I said, what do you mean? I said, a few hours ago, we had a long meeting that day. You said that, more or less, the important parts. So the FDA now, more or less, the important parts are coming up with a vaccine. So what's the problem? I said, it fits the theme perfectly. Perfect. I said, Elamai, in your imagination, and you know nothing about this, you're a number genius, but you're definitely not a chemistry genius. You think that there may be a risk because a normal vaccine took 10 years, and this one, they cut the bureaucracy and red tape, and it's going to take a year and a half. And at that point, it's not safe, so it's not worth taking. So what about the Torah that's around already for 3,300 years, and Am Yisrael that's around for so many years, and Hashem who created you, who says what's safe for you and what's not safe for you. And one of the things he says is to be Mechalel Shabbat. It's not so safe for you. That's definitely proven. It passed phase 1 trial, 2 trial, 3 trial. So you know how many trials it passed? All that because of all the generations that try to contradict the Torah. All the lowlifes of all the generations. All the Jew haters of all the generations that try to persecute Jews. Whether it was the Spanish Inquisition, the Holocaust, and countless other times. And if we go back to the era of the temple, the tragedies were in even greater quantities and unbelievable effects. Harugei Beitar, frightening, the stories. Churban HaBayit, all these things. And we passed all those tests and all those phases in our trial. And we've proven to be here. Am Yisrael Chai V'Kayam. So yeah, that's more or less. But the vaccine, I don't know, again, I'm not here to discuss a specific vaccine. No way, I would never do. I said, so do I think you're going to change or not? I don't know. I'm not judging you. It's none of my business. But at least from now on, if you don't change, you'll feel guilty. You'll feel like a hypocrite. If you feel guilty and a hypocrite, I gained a lot. Because the Chofetz Chaim writes, if somebody doesn't have Avirah, but he feels guilty about it, already a big part of the Avirah is erased. There's a Gemara that says that if you do an Avirah and then you regret it, so Hashem already considers that person a big tzaddik, not stam. And I think the majority of the people in the world, definitely the whole Klal Yisrael, when they do Avirot, they regret it very quickly. Nobody outright I've seen plenty of Jews come and say the whole long L'Shem Yichud with a lot of kavanah before they put on tefillin. Plenty, hundreds, thousands, maybe even millions. I don't even know if there's a number. I've never seen a boy or a girl go and make a whole L'Shem Yichud. I'm going out clubbing tonight. Because one, a person knows is right, and the other one, a person knows is wrong. And what we know is right, we're proud of, and we'll put thought and effort into it. What we know is wrong deep down. We might do it because we have Yetzer Hara, but we all regret it at the end of the day. People brag about, I gave $1 million charity, I gave this, I saved a life, all these beautiful things. I got a blessing from this rabbi, I studied a class by that rabbi. But nobody goes and brags about, I went and did crazy things yesterday. Because the Yiddish neshama, the neshama inside, knows what's right. Chai v're'ai, you know my rule, I don't give ideas, I don't give musa, I don't tell people what to do. If there'll ever be a day that I'll merit to do tshuva myself and be a tzaddik, then maybe I will. I don't think so, but maybe. But, I have a long way to go. So, it's not looking too promising. But I'm telling you what I tell myself every single day. No, you go to shul, you say slichot. I don't know if you go, you don't go. It's not my business. But please, enough of the lip service. Hashem's sick of it already. It's getting stupid. It's getting shallow already. Who are you fooling? Come in singing chatanu lefanecha. The only thing that's missing is a band. Some shuls have that too. Who are we fooling? Okay, enough. Hashem doesn't need your lip service. He'll do much better without it, because at least you won't outright disgrace his name. Hashem needs one and only one thing. Show me an action that you're willing to make a tiny sacrifice for me. Not a big one, even a tiny one. Something. Show me that you're willing to make a sacrifice. I said this many times, and probably over 1,000 times, literally in classes. Not probably, for sure, that's not an exaggeration. Many years ago, a young, non-religious Israeli attorney convinced me to take upon myself that every time I say Birkat HaMazon, to say it from a Sidur, from inside, not to do it out by heart. It's a story on its own. How does a non-religious Israeli attorney come to tell you whatever? But yeah, that's what happened. I was negotiating a very large business deal in Israel at the point. This was my representative, and due to the hour change, Fridays, I wouldn't be able to do my dealings on Friday because I wouldn't cause that person to be Mechalel Shabbat. And it was a Friday morning, and we ran into a problem, and I had to close the phone because I knew in Israel Shabbat's coming in an hour, and you can't cause somebody else to be Mechalel Shabbat. So I said, okay, we'll discuss it on Sunday. And the person said, by Sunday, I don't know if there'll be anything to discuss. We have to come to a resolution. What are we doing? Whether the deal will fall through or not. There was a lot at stake. So I said, it is what it is. Shabbat is Shabbat, and case closed. And this person tells me, and I don't know where these words came from. I honestly think God put words in their mouth just for the sake of giving me a wake-up call. And I say, well, you go to synagogue sometimes on Shabbat, right? So God, I'm sure in synagogue will send you some sort of answer. And he said it in the most cynical way possible. Not announced, there wasn't one bit of anything in that. He was making fun of me, like, yeah, you're in the middle of a serious business deal, and because by me it's Shabbat that I don't keep anyway, you're going to hang up and risk the whole deal of it. I hung up the phone. It didn't make much of what he said. I wasn't even going to fight with him back like I normally would have, because again, Shabbat's coming. I don't want to be part of this. And that was that. Didn't tell anything to anybody. In my heart, I knew if Hashem wants it to be, it'll be. If not, not. And that's the best I can do right now. Friday night, I go to pray in some Ashkenaz shul that I normally don't pray in. Just, it worked out that way. I was about to walk into the regular shul that I prayed in. This one's directly across the street. And I saw a bunch of people that normally don't go pray there either going, and I asked them, why is everybody going there tonight? So they said some rabbi from Israel, which I never even heard his name before, is speaking here tonight between Mincha and Avid. Everybody wants to go hear him, so we're going. I was curious, who's this rabbi that all these college students, real Torah sages, are running to hear? I said, I'm going to go. I go, I see who the person is. I don't recognize him, I didn't know about him, but it turns out he's a big Dayan and Talmid Chacham in Israel. And he gets up to speak between Mincha and Avid, and they allocate him 20 minutes. Normally the rabbi of the shul speaks 5 minutes because he's a guest, 20 minutes. And I was expecting that he's going to give some halacha pilpul or something, something deep. And he gets up there and speaks about the importance of saying Birkat HaMazon from inside a birkon, a bencher. And he brings examples from Rav Shach and Rav Chaim Moiser and this and that. I have many recorded speeches on the subject. And he presented his case in a way that there was no way around it. There was literally no way around it. I walked out of there, I said to myself, wait a second. The lawyer said Friday morning that maybe in synagogue, God's going to tell you what to do to make this deal go through. He did. I took it upon myself that I'm going to say Birkat Hamazon from a bench. That's where it started. That's where it started. Now, honestly, when I took it upon myself, I thought it was no big deal. I thought it's the easiest thing to do. I didn't realize how complicated it could become at times. Fine. I went home. I told my family about I didn't tell my family about the background. I just told them the incident in shul that he spoke about it, and I repeated a lot of what he said and how amazing it is and important it is, and life went on. Sunday, I call the attorney, and I tell him, what's with the deal? He says, well, you don't let me work for you on Shabbat. I didn't do anything. And Saturday night I was out. I didn't do anything. And I said, but by me, it's Sunday morning. That means by you, it's already Sunday afternoon. Why didn't you call this morning? He says, honestly, it's so stupid. If we didn't respond then, that was our deadline, and there's no reason to call. I said, no, I have a feeling there is. So he said, why? I said, because you said that God was going to tell me in synagogue how to resolve it. He did, and I resolved it. And I just said it with full confidence, just like that. And he says, you know what, let's make a conference call. This is because I'm done with you already. You always stick your religion in, and he wasn't, let's just say he wasn't so fond of religion. And he makes a call to this company that we were supposed to have a large acquisition from. And he was like stumbling on his words because he didn't know what to say. We didn't respond to you Friday because, so I told him, you be quiet, let me do the talking. I said Friday we ran late in our decision. We had to make some calculations that we couldn't make. It was going to be Shabbat in Israel. I don't believe in people desecrating Shabbat for the sake of my businesses, under any circumstance whatsoever. I cut my attorney short and told everybody forget about it, and we will deal with it Sunday. Is there anything to talk about, or did we miss our window of opportunity? And the person's like, I don't know, in the notes it says that you got to speak to somebody else, a different name. Okay, so is that person around? Yeah. The person gets on the phone, identifies himself as the primary stakeholder in this thing that we were trying to acquire. I'm like, okay, and he says, something's very confusing over here. I said, what? He said, I've been negotiating with another company simultaneously with you. That's why we gave you the deadline Friday. But Friday at like 8 or 9 p.m., even though I got the full agreement with them and gave them all the terms they wanted, they just sent an email saying that they're pulling out of the deal and whatever. So yeah, of course, the deal's open and we could renegotiate. I said, no, forget about it. And he says, what does that mean? I said, if that company pulled out, they're bigger and better than me. They know something that I don't know. So then I'm not interested in negotiating either. I'm also pulling out. He says, no, we can discuss. You want better terms, you want this, you want that. We ended up acquiring what we acquired for 30% less than what we would have paid based on what we were going to agree to on Friday. And Bli Ayin Hara had a very big success story there. When the deal went through, the attorney asked me, what did God tell you that Friday night? He says, this is unreal, I want to know. What did God tell you? I said, he taught me what Birkat Hamazon is and taught me the importance of saying it from inside. He says, so tell me about it, I want to do the same thing. Hashem has his ways. This person who didn't keep a thing, he didn't even fast Kippur, nothing, Israeli guy, took upon himself as a result of this story that every time he eats bread, he's going to say Birkat Hamazon from a Siddur. No matter what. Drive on Shabbat, not eat on Kippur, but he's going to say Birkat Hamazon from a Siddur. He says, I don't believe in the rest, but this I saw myself. It works. What should I do? Whatever works, I'm not going to fight. A few weeks later, we're in a restaurant in Israel, and he asks me, do you have a Siddur before we start eating? I said, why? He says, because I want to eat bread, but I can only eat bread if I have a Siddur. Then I saw he's serious. He's not joking around, this guy. I said, of course I have a Siddur. I always keep in my pocket a pocket Siddur, so I should be able to say Birkat Hamazon. So he tells me, okay. So I said, wait, his heart's open now, maybe we could push. I said, besides for Birkat Hamazon, first you got to say Hamotzi, because Birkat Hamazon is the second blessing. You don't say the second blessing without the first. He said, all right, does it say that in the Siddur too? Can you show me what Hamotzi is? I said, yeah. I said, and by the way, there's a sink. We do Netilat Yadayim. Not a big deal. He says, yeah, tonight I'm with you. Why not? Let's do it all the way. Let's do it the right way all the way. Fine. I didn't think he was going to continue with that. I just thought for one night at least, one mitzvah is also a mitzvah. A month later, I'm back in Israel with whatever. I'm back with him. We're going out for dinner, for work. And he tells me, I just got to call the waitress for a second. I said, call her, whatever. Like, I don't know. He's very apologetic and polite near me. So he calls the waitress and then he asks her, I went to the sink and there's no cup to do Netilat Yadayim. Can you give me a cup to do Netilat Yadayim? And I'm looking at him like he fell off the moon. And he said, yeah, I ordered a baguette, whatever, and it's like a toast thing, whatever, and it's Hamotzi, and I got to do Netilat Yadayim. I said, you've been doing Netilat Yadayim and Hamotzi all this time? He says, yeah, never missed once. I said, wait a second, so the system's working, so let's continue. I said, listen, Birkat Hamazon is amazing, it's so important, it's unreal. But in order to say Birkat Hamazon, really you should be saying Birkat Torah first. Because right, it says you're doing a mitzvah that says all different psukim from the Torah and things like that. He says, what's Birkat Torah? I show him in the Siddur, what's Birkat Torah? You say in the morning, it takes 25 seconds. So if you want to do the whole thing, the whole Birkat HaShachar. Like this, every trip that I went on business meetings with him in Israel, I figured out a way to build on the puzzle. It started from Birkat Hamazon, from a Siddur, to washing and Hamotzi, to Birkat Torah, to Birkat HaShachar, to Kriyat Shema, to Tefillin. Today he keeps all Taryag mitzvot that are applicable. Unbelievable. And the way it became that was after about 2 years that every time he would add on something else, I one day told him, listen, you're already doing half of Judaism. So why not just do it already and goodbye, concede. That was it. At that moment he turned around, he became a full Baal Tshuva. Unreal. But on the flip side, if I would have day one told him, keep Torah, he would have thrown me away and nothing would have came out of it. But why am I saying this? Because that's why Hashem only expects us to do one little thing. We do 1,000,000 averot, and Hashem says do one little thing. How does that balance out? Because mitzvah goreret mitzvah. If you'll do one little thing, then you're going to change. And I can tell you that over the years, saying Birkat Hamazon from inside wasn't always easy for me. It sounds trivial, and what's the big deal? I don't do it from a phone. I think a phone that's used for too much shouldn't be used for prayer. That's just my personal feelings on the matter. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. So you have to have a physical I'm Sephardi. Many restaurants aren't so Sephardi friendly. They don't always have a Sephardic Birkat Hamazon. At that point, it's not an azon. It's like I used to during the week. You don't need bread, no? Not the end of the world. You can survive without it. Or you come on a plane, you have a siddur in your pocket. But that one thing suddenly changes your entire way of life. Because now when you go into a food place, you're not going into a food place to pig out. The first thing on your head is the planning of Birkat Hamazon. As a result, your meal is a Jewish meal. Everything you do is different. Your whole metzius is different. And that's what Hashem says. Pitchuli petach yichudosh hamachab. Don't think you're going to become a Lamed Vav Tzaddik overnight. Never going to happen. But one tiny thing. Look for something tiny. And based on our first vote, look for something that actually takes an effort. Make an effort. Sacrifice something. Doesn't make a difference what it is. Something. A rabbi in Israel speaks a lot that I'm friendly with told me that he was promoting now in Elul. That he talks to a very young crowd, young teenagers. Normally young teenagers have very frequent friction with their parents. So he was promoting that they should take upon themselves that until next Rosh Hashanah, Friday night from 6 to 10 at night, they won't fight with their parents. I thought at the beginning the idea was totally crazy. But then when I thought it through and I thought the psychology of it, it's unbelievable. If somebody could live up to that, then at 10 o'clock you kind of feel stupid fighting with your parents already. And even if they do a lot of wrong things, you just ignore them and move on, It's just not worth it anymore. It's a brilliant way of approaching things. That's what Hashem wants from us. And He's talking to us clearly, Kol yom bat kol yotzet mechorev, v'omeret shuvu banim shovavim. Every day there's a bat kol that comes out that clearly tells us that we should do tshuva. And we still have a little bit of time left in Elul. And whatever's left of it, the 2 weeks that are left of it, we should maximize its potential And like this, when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, we come to Hashem and we say, we did Tovim Dodecha, we did Yain. Now you do we did Kitovim Dodecha Miyain. Now you do Yishakeni Min Shikot Piu. Because Baruch Hu should help that the whole Klal Yisrael, B'chlal B'frat, and especially on a night like tonight, we have to really pray for this. It's not a joke. In Eretz Yisrael today, hopefully you don't even know about this, but you should be made aware so you should understand why we need extra prayers. With the whole COVID thing and whatever, arrogant person that he doesn't even deserve that his name should be said in public, but he's the head of the deciding whatever of the COVID unit in Israel, said that it's the yeshiva boys that caused COVID in Israel. The idiot doesn't realize that if the yeshiva boys stop learning for a minute, there is no Israel. That'll be the end of Israel in 1 second. But Shugana. And then, not only that, he went and continued, and he said, Reb Chaim Kanievsky is the one who is endangering the state of Israel. I'm surprised he's still amongst us. Talk about the Gdol Ador. Hizaru migachaltam shel tzadikim. Be careful from the coal, the fire of talking about a tzaddik. Gemara says frightening things about somebody who talks about. And of course, the media was all over it. They were all excited. Yeah, Reb Chaim Kanievsky is the cause of Corona. Till now it was Me'at Sha'arim, now it's Reb Chaim Kanievsky. This is Mamash Yimot HaMashiach. The Gemara says in Sotah, V'yireichet, twice, in Sanhedrin and Sotah, V'yireichet Yimasu, those who have really Yirat Shamayim are going to be, Yimasu, we were going to be disgusted with them. Until now, I never understood that Gemara, because Yireichet weren't Yimasu. If anything, maybe the Haredi world wasn't so loved, but the rabbis were always considered celebrities. Even Ben Gurion, Yimach Shemo, went Lavdil Elef Alfei Avdalot the Chazon Ish. Even Begin went to Rav Shach. Even they all respected. So what Yirei Chet Yimasu? Just the opposite. The real Yirei Shamayim, the leaders of the Jewish nation, they always had a lot of respect. Today we saw what it means. That they'll get up on national television and say that Chaim Kanievsky is causing COVID. Because he said the yeshiva boys shouldn't go get tested. He's the one who's causing it. Idiots. Idiots. And that's a very dangerous day for Klal Yisrael, because Hashem doesn't like Al Tigubim Shichai, the pasuk says. Do whatever you want, not Chas V'Shalom, but all the Aveirot that you do, I can look away from. But once you start messing with the Gdolei Yisrael, then it's already a sakona. And our answer to that has to be the opposite extreme. That we should be marbeh in Kvod HaTorah, that we should have more respect for Gdolei Yisrael, that we should learn more about Gdolei Yisrael, especially the Gdolei Yisrael previous generations that we didn't get to know. People don't understand the impact and influence, both spiritually and also in mystics. I can explain at a different time how it also works, that a story of a tzaddik has on a person. It's good to know. You heard the name Chazon Ish, you know who the Chazon Ish was? No, so go over, read about it, learn about who the Chazon Ish was. You heard about the Stipler, you know who he was? You don't know, so read about him. You heard about Chaim Ezra Atiyah, you know who he was? No. He was Rav Avadia's Rebbe, in case you didn't hear about it. So go learn, go find out who these Gdolei Yisrael were. Look how they lived their lives, you learn from it something. Besides, on a mystical level, there's a lot of benefit to it in many other areas as well. Sipurei Tzadikim have a big impact on a neshama. It turns the neshama into a holy neshama. It's an unbelievable thing. So that's Tam and Eitzah. So if they want to be mizalzel in Kvod HaTorah, we have to make an extra effort to emphasize and protect Kvod HaTorah to the biggest extreme, and make sure that we know to respect Torah v'lomdeh in the greatest way. Because Baruch Hu should help that Tichle Shana v'kilotea, Tachel Shana v'bilkotea, the new year will bring with it tons of blessing and bracha and atzlocha and k'tiva v'chatima tova to us and the whole Klal Yisrael, v'chlal u'bifrat, v'yeshua v'nechama, amen v'amen.